That went on for like 5 more minutes, but even I was getting sick of listening to all that copyright-free Star Wars music.
At the end of the last movie, we saw that Rey has now gone to train with Luke, but while she's doing that, the First Order are closing in on a rebel ship, and the rebels are running out of fuel, so Finn and a new character, Rose, have to go and find an expert safecracker to help them break into the First Order ship and disable their tracking device before the rebels run out of time. Now, the description of these plots might sound a little bit basic, but this movie manages to make a lot out of these 3 storylines. As the First Order closes in on the rebels, we see tensions start to rise as their fuel drops and alliances and loyalties are tested. We see Finn and Rose learn more about who funds the war between the rebels and the Order. We see how time has changed Luke, and we see some really interesting developments between him, Rey, and Kylo. And it all leads up to a 3rd act where things just go insane. Now, normally in these reviews I start with the positives, but today I'm going to switch it up because most of the problems that I have with this film come from the first half of this movie. And the first thing that really kind of bugged me is that this movie has some pacing issues. We're following the rebels' ship and their fuel is dropping, so we need to be concerned about how much time they have left, but we don't really get an idea of how long this fuel is supposed to last them because Finn and Rose go off on a mission that feels like it only takes a few hours, but then at the same time, Rey is training with Luke, and that obviously goes over the course of days, if not weeks. Also, speaking of pacing, this movie has an amazing 3rd act, but then it goes into a 4th act. There's like a whole half hour of this movie after where you think it would end, and don't get me wrong, the 4th act is good as well, but it really feels like this movie is over and then it keeps going, so even if it's good, it just feels a bit jarring.
And as I said, Finn and Rose have to find someone to help them break into the First Order ship, so they end up going to this space casino, and they learn some really important stuff about the war there. They learn some great messages that should be brought up in this film. However, it doesn't feel natural for them to go to a space casino in the middle of this movie. It feels more like the writers just got together and went, hey, it would be really cool if they went to this planet. We need to come up with an excuse for them to go to this planet. And I actually loved all the new characters that we got in the last film. Finn, Rey, Poe. I thought each of them were great additions to this universe. However, in this film, while we do get a couple of new characters, the only one who is really a new starring character is Rose. And I really wanted to like Rose, but I just wasn't feeling it. And I think the reason why is because Rose is treated as a tell don't show type of character. And what I mean by that is that in the last film, we got to see Finn and Rey progress and grow as the story goes along. Their character journey happened alongside the journey of the story itself. But in this film, most of Rose's progression happens 10 minutes after we meet her when she decides to go on this big mission. Then after that, most of her character is just going, here's my backstory. It's her telling the audience her backstory, whereas we kind of actually got to see the story of these other characters in the last film. So yeah, I really wanted to like Rose, but it just didn't work for me. I feel like she didn't get the love and attention that Finn and Rey got in the last film. And speaking of the new characters, there are several characters that they introduce in this film who are total mystery figures, and it feels like in order for this movie to make more sense, they really shouldn't have been. In fact, it almost feels like they're using these characters to sell you on the extended universe stuff. For example, there is a character who Finn and Rose end up meeting, and you get no backstory, nothing on them, even though they are a huge part of this story. And part of me wants to applaud this because it feels like they're trying to make it feel like this is a universe full of individual characters who each have their own rich, unique backstories, and that does make your universe feel deeper. But at the same time, it also feels like you now have a movie with missing puzzle pieces, and it feels like this film is turning to you and saying, hey, want to find those missing puzzle pieces? Well, then you better buy the book that's going to come out on this character. You better buy the comic that's going to come out on this character. If you want to know who everybody is and why they're in this situation and why they're suddenly appearing, you gotta buy all the extra stuff. And one last complaint. You know how in the last movie everybody was wondering if Rey was going to hook up with Finn, or Finn was going to hook up with Poe for that matter? Yeah, they don't bring up any of that in this film. They do not mention love or romance at all in this movie, and I'm okay with that. You don't have to just shove a romance into every story out there. Except that's exactly what they do in the last 5 minutes of this movie. Yeah, it would be one thing if you kept stopping all throughout this movie to hint at a romance and try and just shove it in there. It's another thing when you don't bring it up at all throughout your movie, and then in the last 5 minutes you go, oh shoot, I totally forgot, we had to have a romance in this thing. Well let's just have these characters hook up, and you know what? Let's hint at a love triangle. You know what? Love cube, go for broke on this thing. We have to make up for lost time. So okay, as you can tell, I did have some problems with this movie. I didn't hate anything in this movie, far from it, because even the scenes and characters that I did have problems with, there were still things about them that I did end up liking. However, for the first half of this film, I just thought it was, okay. However, when it hits the third, and oddly enough, fourth act of this film, it becomes amazing.
When you see all these characters start to come together, when you see their stories start to play out, all their missions come to a climax, when you see everything that this movie spent the last 2 hours building up finally paying off, it's jaw-dropping. This movie has amazing twists that had me gasping. It had fight scenes that got my heart racing, and it's able to set up the suspense every single beat of the way, so I honestly didn't know what was going to happen. I constantly throughout this film kept saying, you're not actually going to do that, are you? And sometimes they didn't. But sometimes they did. And the characters from the last film, Rey, Finn, and even Poe, all go through great development in this movie. Even Kylo, I thought he was a pretty complex villain in the last film, but here I thought they made him his own unique character that was a great addition to the roster of Star Wars villains, and he takes a turn in here that I didn't see coming at all. When it comes to these new characters, the last film was establishing them and watching them start their journey, and this is an amazing next step for each of them. In fact, it's a next step for the entire franchise. Everyone said that the last film played it too safe. Yeah, this one doesn't do that. This one is willing to come in here and go, time to change this universe up.
In this movie, they're constantly talking about getting rid of the old, and it feels like that's a message about this entire franchise, because it feels like this was the movie where they finally said, okay, time to start building some new stuff with the Force, with this mythology. It's time that we actually start building onto it and actually start experimenting with it, start going in some new directions. If you came into this movie looking for answers, you're going to leave with more questions. But I mean that in a good way, because I'm actually excited now to see what's going to come of this. I'm actually excited to learn more about all the new stuff that they set up for the Force.
But to me, what really impressed me about this film, and combines this idea of taking the old and making it new, is what they did with Luke and Leia in here. This is character progression done right. We look at Leia being a strong, confident leader, and you say, yeah, that's what I can see her character becoming, and it makes sense and it respects the character. But you look at Luke, this grizzled, old, angry loner who has seen too much, and you can also buy that. You can also say, yeah, I see how you could become this. And honestly, when you think about him like this, and then think back to who he was as a kid, it makes his journey an incredible one to follow. And they don't just leave him there. He has a character arc in this story as well, and honestly, it's one of the best written character arcs I've seen all year in a movie, and a lot of that is due to the fact that Mark Hamill is killing it in this role. He owns every scene he's in.
So, what am I going to give this film? Well, it's kind of hard to say, because in the first half of this film, it's like a 7, maybe even a 6 at times. Not bad, still above average, but not great. However, when this movie does get great, it gets amazing. The last half of this film never failed to make me gasp, and even during that first half of this film, when I did have problems with it, there was still stuff in there that I enjoyed all throughout it. So I'm going to give this film an 8.5, because even though it's not a perfect film, it's got perfect moments all throughout it, and I know in 2 years when the next film comes out, I'm not going to remember a lot of the problems I had with this film, but I am going to remember the stuff I loved about it.
Thanks for watching this video, everyone, and if you want to see more movie reviews every single weekend on this channel, then make sure that you click that subscribe button. We also do videos on everything else from the world of geekery, like video games and comic books, all throughout the rest of the week. So again, if you want to see anything like that, then make sure that you click on that subscribe button. And if you want to see our spoiler talk, our long spoiler talk, because there is a lot to talk about in this movie, make sure you click on it right there in the upper right hand corner. And if you want to help support this channel, then you can always follow us on Twitter, Twitch, and Tumblr at Professor Thorgi, and share these videos around the web. It's the best way to help our channel grow. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Come back next time.